Get out, please, and show me your license." Officer Ryan Briggs's voice carried that forced calm that always came before trouble. He stood beside his cruiser, hand resting on his belt. The other gesturing sharply toward the driver's door of a silver SUV idling in the afternoon heat. The sound of cicadas buzzed in the background, a lazy summer hum at odds with the tension building between two men who didn't yet understand the magnitude of this moment. The driver's door opened slowly. A tall, dark-skinned man stepped out, wearing jeans, a navy t-shirt, and mirrored sunglasses that reflected the flashing red lights of the police car. His movements were deliberate, calm, cautious, practiced. He had learned long ago that every gesture mattered. "License and registration," Briggs said again, this time louder. "You heard me." "I did, officer," the man replied evenly. "My license is in my wallet, left pocket. I'll get it slowly." "Just hurry it up," Briggs snapped. His partner, a younger rookie named Cole Harris, shifted awkwardly near the trunk of the cruiser. He'd seen this kind of stop before, one that didn't feel right but never seemed wrong enough to challenge. The driver retrieved his wallet, handed over the card, and waited silently as the officer snatched it away. The man's posture was respectful but unbowed. Briggs glanced at the name, Elias Ward, then smirked. "Ward, huh? You from around here?" "Passing through," Elias replied. "Uh-huh." Briggs turned the card over between his fingers like it offended him. "See, this neighborhood's private property. Got a lot of people coming through who don't belong here." He circled the car like a shark testing boundaries. "Tell me, Ward, who gave you permission to be here? You visiting someone?" "I'm getting lunch," Elias said simply. "That diner across the street," Briggs laughed under his breath. "Lunch," he repeated, the word dripping with disbelief. "You expect me to believe that? In that place?" Elias's gaze followed Briggs's finger, pointing toward the small roadside diner with its faded "home cooking since 1958" sign. A few families were inside, their glances flickering occasionally toward the flashing lights outside. "Sir," Elias said calmly, "I haven't done anything wrong. You're free to check my plate number." "Everything's registered." Briggs tilted his head, studying him. "You know what? You sound educated. Real polite. That's new." He looked over at Harris. "Usually they get loud by now." Harris didn't respond. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The silence between them was heavier than the summer air. Then Briggs stepped forward, close enough that Elias could smell the coffee on his breath. "You think you can just park here, stroll into my town, and act like you belong?" He raised the license again, waving it inches from Elias's face. "This piece of plastic doesn't make you equal, you understand?" Elias's jaw tensed, but his tone never shifted. "That license gives me the same rights as anyone else standing here." Briggs's smile vanished. He looked at the card, the name, the photo, and without a word, ripped it clean in half. The sound was sharp and final, paper fibers tearing, a sound that made time stop. Harris flinched. "Sir," he started, but Briggs raised a hand, silencing him. "You people never learn," Briggs muttered, tossing the torn halves to the ground. "You go wherever you want, act however you want, and then cry foul when someone holds you accountable." Elias bent down slowly, picking up the pieces of his license without looking at the officer. His movements were still steady, but the air had changed. Something in the silence told Briggs he'd just crossed an invisible line. A small crowd had begun forming near the diner. 2 waitresses, a truck driver, a teenage couple. A man in a blue flannel shirt raised his phone, recording Briggs noticed. "Put that phone down," he barked. "This is official police business." The man didn't move. Neither did Elias. "Now," Briggs said louder, stepping forward. Elias straightened. His eyes, unreadable behind his shades, met Briggs's for the first time in full. "You sure you want this recorded?" he asked quietly. The question was simple, but the tone carried the weight of command, calm, direct, and unshakable. Briggs sneered. "You threatening me?" "No," Elias said. "Just making sure you understand the consequences of your actions." For a moment, Briggs didn't answer. Then he scoffed and turned toward his car. "You sit tight," he said. "I'm calling this in." He keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 32, possible trespasser non-compliant, initiating ID verification. Copy that, 32, the dispatcher replied. Name? Briggs looked down at the torn license pieces on the asphalt. Names? Elias Ward, a pause on the line. Then another voice, firmer, unfamiliar, cut through the static. Repeat that, officer. Did you say Elias Ward? Briggs frowned. Affirmative. Why? You know him? The voice returned after a beat. Unit 32, hold position. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage the subject. Briggs blinked, caught off guard. What the hell? The radio crackled again, this time with urgency. That's a direct order, Officer Briggs. Commander Elias Ward, U.S. Navy SEAL, active status, special clearance. Step back immediately. The words hit harder than any shout. Harris's eyes widened. Commander, he whispered. Elias reached into his back pocket slowly, not for a weapon, but for a folded leather wallet. From it, he pulled a dark blue identification card embossed with a silver trident and an American flag. He held it up between two fingers. That's the one you just tore up, he said evenly. But this one you don't get to touch. Briggs's face drained of color. You're military? Elias nodded once. Commander Ward, SEAL Team 7, the crowd murmured. The man with the phone lowered it slightly, whispering, No way! Elias continued, voice calm, steady, and devastating. I was passing through after a security briefing at the naval base. Thought I'd grab a sandwich. Didn't realize I needed permission. Briggs's mouth worked silently, words failing him. Harris stepped forward, uncertain. Commander Ward, I'm sorry, sir. He didn't. It's all right, officer, Elias interrupted. I've dealt with worse. He paused. But your department might want to review its training. The dispatcher's voice returned, now shaking. Commander Ward, sir, command has been notified. Military liaison units en route to your location for verification. ETA 5 minutes. Briggs took a step back. Wait, what does that mean? Elias looked toward the horizon where a black SUV was already cresting the hill, dust trailing behind. It means, he said quietly, you're about to meet my team. The vehicle pulled up fast, stopping beside Elias's car. Two men stepped out, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, wearing tactical polos and dark glasses. No weapons visible, but everything about them radiated authority. Commander, one said with a respectful nod. Heard you had a situation. Minor one, Elias replied, eyes still on Briggs. Nothing we can't fix. The SEAL glanced at the torn license on the ground, then at the trembling officer. You okay, sir? Elias nodded. Fine, but I'd like a record of this stop. The second SEAL already had his phone out, snapping photos. Briggs stumbled over his words. Look, I didn't know, I thought... Elias cut him off with a calm precision that silenced the entire street. You didn't think at all. A hush fell. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. The lead SEAL turned to Briggs. Sir, we'll be filing an official statement. You'll need to cooperate. Briggs's hand shook as he lowered his radio. Harris stepped in quietly, removing it from his grasp and placing it on the cruiser's hood. Elias bent down once more, picking up the last piece of his torn license. You tore up my ID, officer, he said almost softly. But you can't tear up what I stand for. Then he placed the two halves together in his palm, held them up to the light, and for a second, they aligned perfectly. A crowd member clapped once, then another joined. The quiet applause spread until even the diner doors opened and people watched silently, filming what was no longer just a traffic stop, but a reckoning. Briggs stood frozen as the SEALs escorted their commander back to his car. Before getting in, Elias turned to him one last time. His tone remained calm, but now carried something heavier than anger. Authority. Respect isn't something you demand, he said. It's something you show. He closed his car door. The engine started. The convoy rolled out, leaving behind one officer, one broken license, and a lesson that would soon travel far beyond that quiet suburban street. The fluorescent lights in the precinct flickered like they were nervous. Officer Ryan Briggs sat hunched over his desk, his report half finished, his hands shaking just enough to smear the ink across the page. The clock on the wall ticked past 5:42 p.m., but time felt meaningless. He had replayed the moment in his head 100 times already. The ripped license, the calm stare, the black SUV that arrived like a shadow. Those men, Navy SEALs, they said, moving with quiet precision, their eyes giving nothing away. Briggs's pulse still hadn't settled. But fear, when cornered, often morphs into denial. So he did what too many before him had done. He started rewriting the truth. Subject became verbally aggressive during standard ID check, he wrote. Refused to comply. Officer acted in accordance with safety protocol. He paused, chewing the end of his pen. Then he added, possible falsified identification. Subject's demeanor erratic. Across the room, his partner, Officer Cole Harris, sat silently, staring at the wall. His uniform collar was still damp with sweat. Every time he blinked, he saw the same image. The torn license falling to the asphalt, the commander's eyes behind those mirrored shades. The moment everything turned. Briggs looked up. "Harris," he barked. "You got your statement done?" Harris hesitated. "Almost, sir." "Make sure it matches mine." Harris glanced at the report in his hands. "Matches yours?" Briggs leaned back, his chair creaking under the weight of forced confidence. "Yeah, we keep it consistent. You saw how that guy acted. Aggressive, right?" Harris's mouth went dry. "He wasn't aggressive, sir." Briggs's eyes narrowed. "Watch your words, rookie. He was non-compliant. You want internal affairs sniffing around over a misunderstanding?" Harris didn't answer. Briggs lowered his voice. "You've got a career ahead of you. Don't mess it up over one traffic stop. You saw him. Fancy talk, attitude, no respect for authority. The kind that thinks he's above the law." Harris stared at the blank incident form on his screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then slowly began to type. Every keystroke felt heavier than the last. By 7 p.m., the report was filed. Officially, the stop was routine. Unofficially, the lie had already started to rot from the inside. The first crack came from dispatch. At 7:13, dispatcher Rosa Nguyen replayed the earlier radio transmission, the one she couldn't stop thinking about. Her headset caught it all, the hesitation in Briggs's voice, the order from Federal Liaison Control to stand down immediately. That kind of command didn't come from nowhere. She flagged it, attached the timestamp, and quietly marked the file, anomaly, forward to IA. Her supervisor frowned. "You sure about this, Rosa?" "Briggs is a veteran officer." "Exactly," she said. He should have known better than to ignore a federal command. At 8:40 p.m., a new variable entered the story. A local teen named Jaden Brooks, 17, uploaded a 30-second clip to social media with the caption, "Cop tears up a man's license. Then guess who shows up?" The video showed enough. A police cruiser, a man standing calm and silent, and another man in uniform throwing something to the ground. The sound of paper tearing echoed clear. By midnight, the clip hit 200,000 views. By dawn, it was everywhere. Meanwhile, Commander Elias Ward sat in the quiet of his hotel room, the glow of the TV painting lines of reflection across his face. He wasn't watching the news. He didn't need to. He had lived this story before. Not always in uniform, not always in public, but always in spirit. A knock came at the door. He opened it to find a woman in a dark gray suit, credentials already visible. "Commander Ward," she said. "Special Agent Ria Torres, NCIS Liaison. May I come in?" He stepped aside. "You're fast," she smiled faintly. "Your name travels faster." They sat across from each other. Torres placed a tablet on the table and swiped to a paused frame. Briggs, mid-shout, hand raised, license tearing. The reflection of blue lights shimmered across the screen. "Looks bad," she said, "but it's worse than it looks." We pulled body cam backups from his partner. The primary feed conveniently cut out at 16:42. "Conveniently?" Ward asked. "Power failure, according to the officer. But the system auto-uploads. The cloud copy was intact." Ward leaned forward. "And?" Torres's tone sharpened. "And it shows everything." The words, the tone, the license. "Your restraint," she exhaled. "Sir, with your permission, we'll be forwarding the footage to both Internal Affairs and the Department of Defense Inspector General." Permission granted, he said simply. Torres closed the tablet. You know, Commander, most people would be furious. Ward's gaze was steady. I'm not most people. I've seen anger destroy good men faster than bullets. Back at the precinct, the story was shifting under Briggs's feet. He arrived the next morning to find whispers already circulating. His Sergeant Frank Mallory met him at the door. "Briggs," Mallory said, voice clipped. "My office. Now." Inside, the sergeant threw a printed screenshot onto the desk. The viral video, Briggs's stomach dropped. "You see this?" Mallory snapped. "You're all over the damn internet." Briggs swallowed hard. "Sarge, it's taken out of context." "Out of context?" Mallory slammed his palm on the desk. "You tore up a man's license on camera. He was non-compliant. He was a Navy SEAL commander." The words hit like a punch. Briggs tried to form a defense, but Mallory wasn't finished. "Do you have any idea what kind of storm you just kicked up? I've got federal liaisons calling. The mayor's office wants statements. The governor's chief of staff left me 2 voicemails. Hell, even the Pentagon called asking for a transcript." Briggs's voice trembled. "This isn't fair." "Fair?" Mallory snapped. "You think tearing up a veteran's ID for loitering is fair?" "Jesus, Briggs." "You're done." But Briggs wasn't ready to accept that. In his mind, he was the victim, a good cop being sacrificed to politics. He stormed out of Mallory's office, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the blinds. In the hallway, he found Harris waiting. "Did you tell them?" Briggs demanded. Harris blinked. "Tell them what?" "About the body cam. You reported it, didn't you?" Harris shook his head. "Sir, don't lie to me." Briggs's voice cracked, raw with fear. "You're siding with him, aren't you?" With that commander." The silence stretched. Harris didn't deny it. Briggs laughed bitterly. "You think they'll thank you for it? You think they'll keep you on after this blows up?" Harris met his gaze evenly. "I think they'll keep people who tell the truth." By afternoon, Internal Affairs had opened an official inquiry. A folder marked Use of Authority Review, Case 24-117B, landed on Sergeant Mallory's desk. Inside, body cam transcripts, dispatch audio logs, 3 civilian videos, and 1 email from the Department of Defense. The subject line read, "Preservation Order. Do not alter or destroy any evidence related to Commander Elias Ward." Attached was a signature, Rear Admiral Michael Trent, Office of Naval Operations. Mallory read it twice. Then he exhaled and rubbed his temples. "Oh, Briggs," he muttered. "You've really done it this time." That night, the local news opened with the headline, "Navy SEAL Commander Detained in Questionable Traffic Stop. Police Under Review." The footage played again. The ripped license. The calm face. The moment before everything changed. Briggs watched it from his couch, beer sweating in his hand. His wife stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Ryan," she said softly, "you should turn it off." "I didn't do anything wrong," he muttered. "He was disrespectful." Her eyes filled with disbelief. "You tore up his license on camera." "He provoked me." "By existing?" She shot back. Briggs turned away. The room felt smaller than it had the night before. Across town, in a quiet federal building, Commander Ward sat in a debriefing room surrounded by senior officials. The atmosphere was respectful but tense. "Commander," said Admiral Trent, the man who'd signed the preservation order, "do you wish to press charges?" Ward paused, his gaze distant. "I want accountability," he said. "Not revenge," the Admiral nodded slowly. "Then you'll have it. The Department of Justice is coordinating with the state attorney. This won't be swept under the rug." Ward leaned back, silent for a moment. "It never is," he said softly. "It just gets buried until someone digs it up again." By morning, the story had exploded nationwide. News outlets replayed the clip under bold captions like "Power and Prejudice" and "Officer versus SEAL Commander." Public pressure mounted. The police department scrambled for control. Briggs was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Harris received a quiet commendation for preserving his body cam footage. And Commander Ward? He went back to his base, calm, professional, saying nothing publicly, because real power doesn't shout. It waits. And when it moves, it changes everything. By the time dawn hit the precinct, the walls were already whispering. The lie Officer Ryan Briggs had written was cracking faster than the ink could dry. Inside the Internal Affairs wing, cold coffee sat beside stacks of case files. Monitors glowed in the half-light, and someone finally pressed play. Cam 2, 1641-23. Body cam footage. Partial sync recovered from cloud storage. The grainy video opened with Briggs's voice, sharp and proud. "Get out, please. Show me your license." Then static. Then silence. Then the sound that would undo him. Paper tearing. No aggression. No resistance. Just that calm, dignified tone from Elias Ward. The contrast between their voices told the whole story. Sergeant Mallory leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. "Play it again," he said. The technician rewound. The sound repeated. Rip, pause, and a voice saying softly, "That license gives me the same rights as anyone else." Mallory nodded once. "That's the sound of a career ending. Across town, in a glass-walled office of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, Special Investigator Dana Morris poured herself a black coffee and opened a case folder marked Metro County PD, Incident 11B42. The first line of the internal summary read, "Subject, Commander Elias Ward, U.S. Navy SEAL, wrongful detainment and property destruction." She tapped the page twice, then muttered, "Commander?" under her breath. Her partner, Jason Kim, glanced up from his monitor. "Yeah, that's the one that's blowing up online." She frowned. "I thought the guy was just a driver." Kim turned his screen toward her, a paused frame from the viral clip. Elias calm and composed, and Briggs mid-yell. "Nope," Kim said. "Decorated SEAL Commander. Bronze Star. 22 years of service. The internet found him before the department did." Morris leaned closer. "And the officer, Briggs?" 17 years on the force. 2 complaints for excessive force. Both cleared. But get this." Kim pulled up another tab. "Same cop was disciplined in 2018 for disabling his dash cam during a pursuit." Morris raised an eyebrow. "Pattern." She closed the file and stood. "Get me the body cam metadata. I want time stamps, GPS pings, and radio logs. Cam 4, 164125 Councilwoman's dashboard live stream, city vehicle feed backup." The view was angled from across the street. The image shook slightly as the car idled. Elias stood calm, hands visible. Briggs leaned forward, voice audible through the open mic. "This place isn't for people like you," the councilwoman's voice whispered off-screen. "Did he just say that?" The recording had already been archived under public property feed, chain of custody verified. There would be no editing, no denying. Meanwhile, at Naval Command HQ, Admiral Trent stood by a window overlooking the Potomac. He held a printed transcript. The Federal Preservation Order now live in both Justice and Defense databases. Commander Ward's file sat beside it. 17 deployments, counterterrorism, humanitarian rescue. No disciplinary record. Trent turned to his aide. "I want everything sent to the Office of Naval Oversight, quietly. This goes beyond one officer." "Yes, sir." "And the commander?" "He's to stay clear publicly. No interviews." His silence speaks louder than anything right now. By midday, Internal Affairs had pieced together the digital evidence timeline. Cam 2, 164123, teen's phone, cross-street angle. Cam 4, 164125, councilwoman's dash feed. Cam 7, 164201, neighbor's security footage. Automatically cloud-synced, each feed told the same story from a different truth. 3 perspectives. 1 conclusion. Briggs tore the license before any lawful cause was stated. The IA captain, Elaine Ortiz, wrote it cleanly in her notes. Violation of procedure, civil misconduct, abuse of authority. Then she added one more line. Public trust compromised, pending DOJ escalation. Back in the precinct locker room, Briggs sat alone on the bench, staring at his reflection in the small dented mirror above the sink. His badge sat beside him on the metal shelf. The reflection didn't look like authority anymore. It looked like consequence. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You had your chance to tell the truth. DM. He didn't know it yet, but Dana Morris had just officially placed him under federal watch. That evening, the Metro City Times ran an exclusive federal investigation launched into officer conduct. Navy SEAL commander's rights violated. Byline: Sophia Grant, investigative correspondent. The article cited unnamed federal sources confirming body cam discrepancies and DOJ oversight. Public reaction was immediate. Justice Forward trended across platforms within hours. At 19:03, Special Agent Ria Torres, NCIS, received a direct message from DOJ headquarters. Subject: Joint Task Review. Briggs case. Note: Commander Ward's testimony requested. Evidence chain verified via FOIA upload. She exhaled slowly, muttering, "They're moving fast." Her partner asked, "You think the commander will testify?" Torres shook her head. "He doesn't need to. The footage already did." 2 days later, the official investigative meeting took place in a secure conference room downtown. Around the table sat Dana Morris, DOJ Ria Torres, NCIS, Elaine Ortiz, Internal Affairs, Sergeant Mallory, PD Liaison. Large monitor displayed a paused frame of Briggs tearing the license. Morris spoke first. "We're here to align jurisdiction. Federal property, civil rights, and military status are all in play." Ortiz flipped open her binder. "Our review confirms procedural violations on multiple counts. Officer Briggs falsified his report." Mallory rubbed his temples. 17 years on the job. I trained the man. "Never thought I'd see this day," Torres interjected calmly. "Every system eventually reveals its weak links, Sergeant. The point is, what happens next?" The group fell silent as the next slide appeared. The dispatch log. Dispatch record. 1643. 12. Unit 32. Do not engage. Subject is Commander Elias Ward, U.S. Navy SEAL. Stand down immediately. The proof was irrefutable. Morris looked up. The dispatcher followed protocol. The officer ignored a direct federal order. Ortiz nodded. "That makes it criminal, not just disciplinary." At that same hour, Commander Ward was walking quietly along the pier near his base. The water rippled gold in the sunset. His phone buzzed. A message from Admiral Trent. "Investigation underway. You did nothing wrong, but the system will test your patience again. Stay steady," Ward smiled faintly. "Always do," he whispered. Beside him, one of his teammates, Chief Petty Officer Kane, spoke quietly. "Commander, the boys are restless. They saw the video." "I know," Ward said. "Tell them to let it go." "You sure?" Ward looked out at the horizon. "The Navy doesn't retaliate. It rebuilds." The next morning, the first DOJ subpoena hit the precinct inbox. 2. Officer Ryan Briggs. Subject: civil rights violation. Notice of federal review. The document was short, clinical, and devastating. It listed 6 potential charges under Title 18, U.S. Code Paragraph 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Briggs read the line 3 times, his mouth dry. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. From down the hall, Harris watched silently as 2 IA agents entered and collected Briggs's badge and sidearm. No one said a word. Later that afternoon, Agent Morris walked past the evidence board and stopped at the center photo, the one from Cam 7, the neighbor's feed. The timestamp read 1642 or 01. The image, the moment Elias bent to pick up the torn pieces of his license. In the reflection of the car's window, you could see the officer's face, tense, angry. And behind him, "The crowd recording? Frame of history," she murmured. Torres joined her. "It always starts with one moment," Morris nodded, "and ends with reform. If we do our jobs right." 3 weeks later, an official press release was issued by the DOJ. Federal oversight initiated. Metro County Police Department to undergo full civil rights audit. Preliminary findings confirm misuse of authority and evidence tampering. The Department of Defense and Department of Justice will jointly oversee reform measures. Commander Ward didn't appear at the press conference. He didn't need to. His silence had already become the story's moral center, a symbol of composure under fire. Meanwhile, in the shadows of online forums, conspiracy threads tried to twist the story, calling it political or staged. But facts, this time, had receipts, body cam, live stream, cloud backup, FOIA chain. Every lie Briggs wrote was met with digital proof that could not be deleted. In one final scene, Ward sat alone in his study that night, the pieces of his torn license framed on his desk, not as a symbol of anger, but as a reminder. He whispered softly to himself, "Respect isn't given by rank. It's proven by how you treat people when you think no one's watching." He turned off the lamp. Outside, the waves broke softly against the dock, and far across town, in a dimly lit office, Dana Morris finished her report and clicked send. The investigation was complete. The truth was preserved. The next step would be justice. The camera fades out on a single document pinned to a bulletin board inside the precinct hallway. Preservation order, federal jurisdiction pending. Case 24-1117B. Subject, Officer Ryan Briggs. Filed U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights. The precinct conference room was dead silent except for the hum of the AC. The blinds were drawn. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Every officer on duty had been called in. No one knew exactly why, just that Chief Daniels had ordered a full briefing regarding the Ward situation. Officer Ryan Briggs sat near the back, arms crossed, jaw tight. His uniform looked pressed, but his eyes told another story, sleepless, red, defiant. He kept whispering to himself, I didn't know who he was. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened. Two men in dark suits entered first, followed by Commander Elias Ward, in full Navy dress uniform, medals aligned perfectly across his chest. His posture flawless, his expression unreadable. The room shifted. Chairs squeaked. Someone muttered, "That's him." Chief Daniels stood. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Commander Ward of the United States Navy. He's here on official request from the Department of Defense and Justice." Ward nodded once. "Morning." His voice was calm, firm, and carried a quiet authority that didn't need volume to command attention. Briggs stared at him, frozen. The last time he'd seen that face, it had been framed in blue and red lights under a cloud of humiliation. Ward looked around the room, then fixed his gaze on the chief. "You wanted to understand what happened. I think it's time everyone heard it straight." He stepped forward. "When I was stopped," Ward began, "I wasn't wearing this uniform. I was wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and carrying a grocery bag. That shouldn't matter, but it did." He paused, letting the silence breathe. "The officer who stopped me didn't ask for context. He made assumptions. He tore up my ID and told me people like me didn't belong there." Briggs's throat tightened. His pen rolled off the table, clattering to the floor. Ward continued, his tone even. "He didn't know my background. He didn't know I've served this country for over 2 decades, that I've led operations to save lives he'll never hear about. But again, that shouldn't matter either." The words hit like precision strikes, calm, devastating, undeniable. Chief Daniels shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, for the record, the department deeply regrets." Ward raised a hand gently. "With respect, Chief, regret doesn't repair a system. Accountability does." A murmur spread across the room. Across the glass wall, media crews had already gathered in the lobby. The story had broken overnight. Navy SEAL commander confronts department after wrongful detainment. Federal investigators stood by in the hallway, notebooks in hand. This wasn't just another internal review anymore. It was a federal proceeding in all but name. Briggs clenched his fists under the table. His chest burned as if every breath scraped against guilt. He looked down at his uniform patch. "Protect and serve." The words suddenly felt hollow. Chief Daniels cleared his throat. "Officer Briggs, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Every head turned. Briggs hesitated. Then, with a tremor in his voice, he said, "Sir, I didn't know who he was. I made a mistake." Ward tilted his head slightly. "A mistake?" he repeated. "Tell me, officer, if I were just a janitor, would it still be a mistake?" Briggs looked up, eyes wet but defensive. I didn't mean any harm." Ward took a step closer. "You didn't have to mean it for it to matter." The silence stretched again, sharp, suffocating, alive with tension. In the back of the room, Special Agent Dana Morris watched everything unfold. Her pen moved across her notepad like clockwork. Subject displays, denial, rationalization, minimal accountability. She underlined one word twice: pattern. The chief gestured toward the screen behind him. Let's make this official. Play the footage. The projector flickered to life. The room dimmed. Cam 4. Councilwoman-feed, 1641-25, the video played. Briggs's voice cut through the quiet. This place isn't for people like you. The sound of the license tearing echoed, followed by Ward's calm reply. That license gives me the same rights as anyone else. The feed froze on that frame. Ward standing tall. Briggs mid-motion, anger twisted on his face. Someone in the room whispered, "Jesus," the chief exhaled heavily. There it is, proof. Briggs dropped his head into his hands. "Please, turn it off." Ward didn't move. "No," he said quietly. "Let them see." When the lights came back on, the chief's voice was barely audible. "Commander, on behalf of the department, I extend our apologies." Ward nodded slightly. "Accepted. But understand this. I didn't come here for an apology." He looked around at the officers. Some veterans, some rookies, all staring at him with varying shades of shame, confusion, or respect. "I came here because this department, like many across the country, has forgotten what those badges stand for." "You swear to protect citizens, I'd not profile them." He took a breath, his tone steady but fierce. "Power without discipline is chaos, and chaos in uniform destroys trust faster than any crime ever could." The chief looked down. No one argued. Briggs stood up suddenly. "Commander, I want to say I'm sorry." Ward looked at him, expression unreadable. "You should be, but not because I'm a Navy SEAL." He leaned closer, voice low enough for only Briggs to hear. "You should be sorry because one day you'll stop the wrong kid. And next time, there won't be a camera." Briggs's eyes filled with tears he couldn't blink away. As the meeting adjourned, Ward turned to the chief. "Chief Daniels, I'll be submitting a formal report to DOJ recommending reforms, mandatory bias training, independent oversight, and an external accountability board." Daniels nodded. "We'll cooperate fully, Commander." "I know you will," Ward said, "because now the country's watching." Outside, as Ward stepped through the precinct doors, the crowd erupted, reporters shouting questions, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. "Commander Ward, do you plan to sue? Are you pressing charges? Do you think this will change policing in America?" Ward stopped briefly on the steps, then spoke evenly. "I believe in justice," he said. "And justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be consistent." Then he walked away. No entourage, no cameras following, just a man whose silence carried more weight than 1,000 speeches. Inside, the chief sat alone at his desk. His phone buzzed, a call from the mayor's office. He answered, "Yes, ma'am." "He was here." "Yes, the commander himself." He listened for a long moment, then said softly, "Understood. We'll cooperate with the federal audit." He hung up and stared out the window. Across the street, the crowd was still cheering. And for the first time in 20 years, Chief Daniels realized that maybe, just maybe, the system could actually change. Not because of rules, but because someone refused to shout back at injustice. That night, Briggs packed the last of his things into a cardboard box. His locker stood open, the metal tag scratched from years of wear. His badge sat on top of the pile, dull, heavy, final. Harris appeared at the doorway. "You okay?" Briggs shook his head. "No," Harris nodded slowly. "You could have stopped it sooner." Briggs laughed bitterly. "You think I don't know that?" "You'll have to live with it," Harris said quietly. "But maybe that's how change starts." He walked away, leaving Briggs alone with his own silence. Across the city, Commander Ward sat by his window, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. On his desk lay a letter. Handwritten, no signature. "You reminded us what discipline looks like. We won't forget it." "A citizen," Ward smiled faintly, folded the letter, and placed it in a drawer beside his medals. Outside, dawn broke again, quiet, relentless, and clean. And somewhere, A new recruit was getting ready to wear a badge, unaware that the man whose ID was torn apart had just changed what that badge would mean. The story hit the nation like a thunderclap. Every news channel looped the same 30-second clip, a uniformed cop tearing a driver's license in half, followed by the slow reveal that the driver was a decorated Navy SEAL commander. The clip went viral. The headline, simple and devastating: Badge versus Valor, the license that shook a nation. Within 24 hours, the mayor called an emergency press briefing, flanked by legal advisors and 2 federal agents. She spoke into a wall of flashing cameras. What occurred on the afternoon of October 3rd is unacceptable. We have requested full cooperation with the Department of Justice, and the officers involved are under immediate review. Behind the podium, Chief Daniels stood stiffly, his eyes fixed on the floor. And in living rooms across America, people watched, some in outrage, some in disbelief, and some in shame. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the wheels of accountability had already started turning. Inside the Department of Justice, a meeting convened between Civil Rights Division head Angela Price, Attorney General Marcus Doyle, and NCIS liaison Rhea Torres. Angela placed the file on the mahogany table. The cover read, Subject: Commander Elias Ward, Civil Rights Violation, Police Misconduct Case, 24-117B. She looked at Doyle. It's clean, documented, and airtight. Multiple videos, dispatch logs, federal interference. We have everything we need. Doyle leaned back, thoughtful. The optics are bad, he said. A cop tearing up a SEAL's license? It's the kind of story that defines elections. Torres crossed her arms. Sir, with all due respect, it's not optics. It's a pattern. Commander Ward just happens to be the one who exposed it. Angela nodded. He's not just a victim. He's a mirror, one this country can't look away from. Doyle sighed. Fine, we'll make it official. Civil rights indictment, federal oversight, and a DOJ hearing. He looked at Torres. You'll escort the commander personally. Keep it controlled. Yes, sir. At the same time, in a small house on the city's edge, Ryan Briggs's world was collapsing piece by piece. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Journalists, lawyers, even old academy buddies who wanted his side of the story. His wife had stopped answering the door. On the living room table sat 3 unopened letters. Notice of suspension, without pay, Internal Affairs. Subpoena Department of Justice summons. Words blurred together into one heavy truth. His career was over. He sat there staring at the muted TV as commentators debated his name. Was it racism or ego? How could a trained officer lose control like that? And how does a Navy SEAL just stand there and take it? He threw the remote. The screen cracked. 2 days later, the first DOJ hearing took place in the federal building downtown. Cameras lined the marble steps, reporters shouting as black SUVs arrived one by one. Inside, the hearing room was a study in composure and consequence. Polished oak tables, brass placards, the seal of the United States glinting under studio lights. Briggs sat at the witness table, his lawyer whispering frantically beside him. Across from him, calm, unflinching, sat Commander Elias Ward. Ward wore no medals this time, just a navy blue suit, crisp and understated. The kind of presence that didn't need decoration. The hearing officer, Judge Elaine Voss, adjusted her glasses. Let's begin. Angela Price, representing the DOJ, stood first. The department will demonstrate that Officer Briggs not only violated procedure, but intentionally escalated a peaceful encounter. His actions were motivated by bias, reinforced by misconduct, and resulted in the unlawful detainment of a federal officer. Briggs's lawyer rose. Objection, Your Honor. My client had no knowledge of the commander's identity. Judge Voss looked over her glasses. Ignorance of identity doesn't justify ignorance of duty, the room murmured. Angela continued. We have 3 separate videos, 2 dispatch logs, and digital metadata confirming Officer Briggs received a stand-down order from federal control, which he ignored. She clicked the remote. The footage played. There it was again, the tearing sound, the stillness, the sentence that now defined a movement. That license gives me the same rights as anyone else. When the video ended, no one spoke. Briggs's lawyer whispered, "Say something." Briggs hesitated, then leaned toward the microphone. "I made an error in judgment." Angela crossed her arms. "An error that nearly caused a federal incident." Ward remained silent, his gaze calm but unyielding. Judge Voss tapped her pen. "Commander Ward, do you wish to make a statement?" He nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked directly at Briggs. "When you wear a uniform," he said quietly, "you represent more than authority. You represent trust. I've spent my entire career under orders to protect that trust, even when it meant risking my life. I expected the same from those who serve this country here at home." He paused. "What happened that day isn't about me. It's about what happens when power stops listening to principle." He looked toward the bench. "I don't want revenge. I want reform." The words echoed like thunder in the stillness. By the end of the hearing, the ruling was clear. Officer Ryan Briggs terminated from duty. Federal charges filed under 18 U.S. Code, Parwar 242, deprivation of rights. Case referred for criminal review. The gavel struck. The cameras flashed. Briggs lowered his head into his hands. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Protesters held signs reading, "Equal means equal," and "Justice for all ranks." Ward emerged flanked by Torres and Price. Microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting over each other. "Commander, do you forgive him? Will you press further charges? Do you think this changes anything?" Ward paused, meeting the cameras head-on. "I forgive the man," he said, "but not the mindset. That's what we have to fix." Then he walked away, disappearing into the convoy of black cars. 3 days later, Briggs's face appeared on the evening news. Mugshot, headline, and all. Former officer indicted in federal civil rights case. Meanwhile, the city announced sweeping changes. All officers required to undergo constitutional ethics retraining. Body cams, to be automatically synced with cloud. Storage, independent oversight board established for civilian. Complaints, and at the center of it all, the name that started it, Commander Elias Ward. In Washington, Ward received a quiet visit from Admiral Trent. The older man entered his office carrying a folder marked "Confidential." Trent placed it on the desk. "The president saw your testimony." Ward raised an eyebrow. "That right?" Trent nodded. "He's asked to meet you, privately. Wants your advice on law enforcement reform initiatives." Ward exhaled slowly. "I'm not a politician," Trent smiled. "No, but you're what they need. Someone who doesn't speak for applause." That evening, news anchors summarized it perfectly. A single act of arrogance exposed a system of imbalance, but it also gave birth to a new dialogue, one led not by outrage, but by composure. In living rooms across the country, parents showed their kids the clip of Ward standing calmly beside the torn license. Teachers used it in classrooms. Activists used it as fuel. For a moment, the nation remembered what dignity under pressure looked like. As for Briggs, his story faded into the archives, just another name in the long record of officers who forgot what the badge truly meant. But for Ward, the story was only beginning, because in the quiet of that courtroom, he hadn't just defended his name, he had redefined what respect under authority could look like. Section 6, the turning point. The West Wing was quieter than usual. Behind the tall glass windows, Washington glowed in the distance, the city that ran on power, promises, and the illusion of control. But inside the Oval Office, the air was different, measured, respectful. Commander Elias Ward stood across from the President of the United States. No cameras, no podiums, no entourage. Just two men, one in uniform, one in command. The President leaned forward on his desk, elbows resting on a folder stamped "Confidential Police Oversight Reform." "I've seen your testimony, Commander," he said. It's not often a man walks through humiliation with grace and turns it into a lesson for the nation. Ward didn't move. "With respect, sir, I didn't intend to make a statement. I just told the truth. That's exactly why people listened, the president replied, his voice low. They saw a soldier who didn't fight back with rage, just reason. That's power we can build on. He opened the folder. Inside were policy drafts, outlines for a new federal training mandate, and a proposal for civilian oversight at the national level. I want your input, he said, not as a political figure, but as someone who understands both discipline and dignity. Ward hesitated, then took a seat. Sir, if you want real change, start with empathy training, not just rules. You can't legislate morality, but you can teach awareness. The president nodded slowly. You think that'll stop another Briggs? No, Ward said simply. But it might create one less. The room fell silent again. Outside, a Marine saluted the flag in the courtyard. By the next morning, the story had evolved. What began as a local scandal had transformed into a national dialogue. News anchors now spoke the commander's name with respect. Commentators who once debated his restraint now called it an example of measured heroism. And across the internet, a single quote trended under millions of shares. Respect isn't proven by rank. It's proven by how you treat people when no one's watching. Commander Elias Ward back at the Metro City Police Department. Things looked very different. The lobby that once echoed with routine chatter now displayed a banner that read, "Reform begins with responsibility." Chief Daniels had resigned quietly, replaced by Acting Chief Leah Monroe, a former Marine MP known for her zero-tolerance stance on corruption. Her first order, retraining every officer, starting with patrol units. She stood at the podium in the main hall addressing the assembled officers. From now on, she said, we record everything. We serve everyone. And we forget no one. Her eyes scanned the crowd. The badge doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you accountable. The room stayed silent. For once, the words didn't sound like a speech. They sounded like a warning. Meanwhile, Ward sat in his Navy office overlooking the Potomac River. The American flag fluttered outside his window. Stacks of letters filled his desk. Handwritten notes from citizens, veterans, and even children. One read, "My dad's a cop. He said you made him remember why he became one." Another, "I watched your video in class today. I want to be calm like you when I grow up." Ward smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what this was for," he murmured. His phone buzzed. It was Special Agent Dana Morris. "Commander," she said, "the federal audit just went public. 24 departments across the country are under review. Your case set the standard." Ward exhaled slowly. "It's a start." Morris replied, "A start's all change ever needs." That night, Ward met with his SEAL teammates at a small diner off the base. The table was filled with familiar faces, men who had bled, fought, and nearly died beside him. Chief Kane grinned. "So, sir, the commander goes viral and the country grows a conscience." "Didn't see that coming," Ward chuckled. "Neither did I." Another teammate, Lopez, leaned forward. "You could have destroyed that cop right there on the street, and nobody would have blamed you. But you didn't. Why?" Ward thought for a moment. "Because control isn't weakness," he said. "It's discipline, the kind that wins wars, and peace." They nodded quietly. They understood. Across the country, reforms began rolling in. The Federal Integrity Act was passed, mandating automatic body cam upload systems and third-party monitoring. The Ward Standard, as it came to be known, became part of police academy ethics training nationwide. Civil rights workshops for officers were now taught by both veterans and community leaders. CNN called it the most significant shift in law enforcement accountability since 1992. Weeks later, Briggs sat in a courthouse hallway waiting for his sentencing. His uniform was gone. So was the defiance. His lawyer whispered, "You can appeal, Ryan." He shook his head. "To what, my own conscience?" When the door opened, he saw Ward standing across the hall, there for a different meeting, but fate had brought them face to face one last time. They locked eyes. No anger, no words, just understanding. Ward gave a small nod. Not of forgiveness, not even pity, just closure. Briggs lowered his gaze and whispered, "I'll do better if I ever get another chance." Ward's reply was simple. "Make sure no one else needs one." Then he turned and walked away. The media called it the handshake that never happened. But the real story wasn't about the confrontation anymore. It was about the correction. In a world obsessed with outrage, Elias Ward had shown that dignity could be louder than fury. A month later, Ward stood at the Naval Academy podium, speaking to a hall of cadets. Cameras rolled. The moment would be broadcast worldwide. "When I joined the Navy," he began, "I thought discipline was about following orders. It took me 20 years to learn it's about understanding people." He glanced at the audience, hundreds of young faces, watching, listening. "You don't earn respect by rank or medals. You earn it by restraint, by choosing peace when chaos tempts you." He paused, his voice soft but firm. "And sometimes the hardest battle you'll ever fight isn't on foreign soil. It's right here, in how we treat each other." The audience rose to its feet, the applause rolling through the hall like a wave. That night, alone in his office, Ward looked out over the river again. The framed pieces of his torn driver's license hung on the wall, not as a wound, but as a reminder. He whispered quietly, "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands still." The moonlight caught the edge of his Navy medal, and for a moment it glowed like the badge he never wore, but always honored. Section 7. Legacy and Reform. 6 months later, the story of Commander Elias Ward had become more than a headline. It was a case study. Universities taught it. Police academies debated it. Community groups printed his quote on posters. The moment that began with the sound of paper tearing had reshaped an entire conversation about power and responsibility. At the Metro City Police Department, reform wasn't just a word, it was policy. The old training center had been renamed the Ward Justice Institute. Its motto, carved into the entrance wall, read, "Respect is not given. It is demonstrated." Inside, recruits moved through scenario simulations, traffic stops, domestic calls, community responses. But this time, they weren't just graded on control. They were graded on restraint. A new module called Cognitive Ethics taught empathy, bias awareness, and tactical de-escalation. Footage of Commander Ward's calm composure was part of the curriculum. During one training session, a young recruit named Officer Lila Trent raised her hand. "Sir," she asked the instructor, "how do you stay calm when someone disrespects you?" The instructor smiled. "You remember the difference between authority and power. Authority is your badge. Power is how you choose to use it." Across the city, Ward's influence reached beyond policing. At Lincoln High School, students gathered in the auditorium for Justice Day. On the screen, a clip played. The moment Ward said, "I don't want revenge. I want reform." A girl in the front row whispered, "He sounds like my dad when he talks about discipline." Her friend nodded. "Yeah, but nicer." Their teacher, Ms. Green, smiled. "He's proof that calm can change more than anger ever will." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the Federal Oversight Commission on Law Enforcement was officially signed into law. The bill, known colloquially as the Ward Act, mandated automatic body cam preservation orders, no manual deletions. Federal audits of civil rights complaints every 18 months. Joint training programs between law enforcement and the military on ethics and composure under stress. President Collins signed it into law with Ward standing quietly beside him. As the cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. "Commander Ward, how does it feel to have a law named after you?" Ward gave a small smile. "It's not about me. It's about the next person who won't have to prove they belong." Back home, the city had changed too. Where protests once filled the courthouse plaza, community fairs now took place. Police officers serving food beside local families. Chief Leah Monroe walked among them unarmed, greeting citizens with warmth that used to be rare in that uniform. She paused by a mural that covered an entire brick wall, a painting of Commander Ward standing tall, his torn license glowing gold in his hand. At the bottom, a caption read, "From broken paper to unbroken principle." Monroe touched the edge of the mural. "We're still earning this," she said softly. Briggs's story had become a quiet footnote, but even he wasn't forgotten. After serving his short sentence, he joined a rehabilitation program called Shield Renewed, helping train new officers on the cost of misconduct. He stood before a classroom one morning, his voice low but clear. "I tore up a man's ID once because I thought the badge made me right," he said. "That man turned out to be everything I wasn't. Disciplined, patient, and better than my anger." He looked around at the young officers, listening intently. "If you ever think you're above accountability, you're already below it." One of them raised a hand. "You mean Commander Ward?" Briggs nodded. "Yeah, he didn't destroy me when he could have. He just showed me what real strength looks like." For the first time, the room didn't see a disgraced cop. They saw a lesson. Ward himself rarely spoke to the press anymore. Fame wasn't his goal, and attention wasn't his fuel. He preferred to work quietly, consulting the Department of Justice, helping write reform frameworks, mentoring veterans adjusting to civilian life. One evening, he visited a local youth chess club downtown, the same club he had helped fund anonymously. A boy approached him shyly, holding a pawn. "Sir, my dad says you're the reason he trusts cops again." Ward knelt, smiling. "And you're the reason I still trust the future." The boy grinned, clutching the pawn like a trophy. A documentary soon followed. Command Under Fire, the Elias Ward story. It wasn't sensational. It was thoughtful. Footage of the incident was paired with quiet interviews. Officers, citizens, Ward's SEAL teammates. Chief Monroe's quote summed it up best. "He didn't fight the system with fists. He fought it with composure. And he won." On the anniversary of the incident, Ward received an invitation from the Navy Command Council. He assumed it was another formal ceremony. Instead, it was something else. When he arrived, Admiral Trent handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter written in neat handwriting. "Commander Ward, your conduct under pressure exemplified not only military discipline, but human integrity. In recognition of your actions, you are hereby promoted to Rear Admiral, effective immediately." Ward blinked, genuinely surprised. "Sir, I never asked for this." Trent smiled. "That's why you deserve it." The applause that followed was quiet but meaningful. That night, he stood alone on the deck of the naval pier. The sea was calm, reflective, endless, like the peace he had fought for without firing a shot. A reporter's voice from a nearby TV echoed faintly through the dockyard speakers. 1 year later, the world still remembers the man who turned humiliation into history. Ward looked up at the sky. "Not history," he murmured. "Just correction." Across town, in the police academy classroom, recruits recited the new Ward Code of Conduct as part of their morning oath. "I will serve with restraint before reaction, with empathy before assumption, and with dignity, always, for all." Their instructor lowered the flag at the end of the session and said softly, "Remember, you're not protecting a neighborhood. You're protecting a principle." By the end of that year, crime rates in Metro City dropped 12%. Civilian complaints fell by half. And for the first time in decades, a local poll showed that 78% of citizens said they trusted their police force. The last line of the report summed it up in 3 words: "The Ward effect endures." Late one evening, Ward visited the same stretch of road where it all began. The streetlights glowed softly against the pavement. The air was calm, almost forgiving. He parked, stepped out, and looked at the spot where his license had been torn apart. Now a small plaque stood by the curb. "Site of the Ward incident, October 3rd. A reminder that respect must never be conditional." He stood there quietly, the wind brushing past his uniform. After a moment, he saluted. Not to the plaque, not to the memory, but to the idea that justice, once awakened, doesn't sleep again. The world kept moving, but something fundamental had shifted. The viral clip that once fueled outrage had become part of a quiet revolution, the kind that doesn't shout, but steadies hands and clears vision. Across the country, police academies recited a new creed before roll call. High school civics classes replayed the courtroom footage as a study in courage and restraint. Veterans wrote open letters reminding America that discipline isn't just for the battlefield, it's for the streets we live on. At a small community center in Atlanta, a workshop titled The Ward Standard drew officers, students, and activists. A projector hummed softly, showing still frames, the torn license, the calm face, the moment the truth surfaced. No narration, just silence. Then a voice from the back, an elderly woman, said, "That's the day dignity won." Applause followed, not loud, but lasting. Months later, Commander Elias Ward visited that same center. No cameras, no uniform, just a simple gray sweatshirt. Children clustered around him, showing drawings of flags, badges, and hands shaking. One boy asked, "Sir, were you scared that day?" Ward smiled. "Everyone feels fear, son. The question is what you do with it." He knelt so the boy could see his eyes. Sometimes standing still is braver than stepping forward. Back in Metro City, the plaque by the curb had become a quiet landmark. Couples stopped for photos. Officers paused during patrol to straighten the flowers people left there. Someone had taped a small note under the bronze lettering, "He didn't fight to win. He stood to remind us who we are." Every few weeks, the city maintenance team replaced the weather-faded paper, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Nationally, reforms matured. Departments that once dismissed civilian complaints now had oversight boards chaired by citizens and veterans. Traffic stop encounters declined 14% nationwide. Body camera compliance reached 98%. And in dozens of precincts, officers began signing a new clause in their oath. "I will protect every citizen with the same respect I expect in return." It wasn't law. It was conscience, codified. For Ward, life slowed. He declined speaking tours, turned down book deals. He preferred early morning runs by the river, the rhythm of breath matching the quiet hum of distant sirens that now sounded less threatening, more purposeful. When reporters finally caught him outside the Naval Pier one evening, they asked, "Commander, what do you want people to remember about your story?" He paused. The sunset cast gold over the water. "I don't want them to remember me," he said softly. "I want them to remember how calm feels stronger than hate." The clip aired on nightly news, 10 seconds long, but it spoke louder than 1,000 commentaries. A year later, at the dedication of the National Center for Ethical Policing, Ward stood beside Chief Leah Monroe. The crowd included officers, activists, and families from both sides of the badge. Behind them, engraved on marble, a single line: "Integrity is how you act when no one salutes." When Ward stepped to the podium, he didn't bring notes. He spoke from memory, from conviction. "We can't rewrite what happened that day," he said, "but we can decide what it means. Justice isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. And if we're brave enough to look into it, it shows us not just who we are, but who we can become." The audience rose slowly, not in frenzy, but in reverence. Even the officers in the back removed their hats. That evening, the president delivered a televised address marking the anniversary of the Ward Act. Behind him, footage rolled, police recruits training beside community volunteers, officers mediating youth programs, neighborhoods once divided now painting murals together. This nation was reminded, the president said, that strength without humility is fragility disguised as pride. Commander Ward's story is not one man's redemption. It's our collective correction. Millions watched in silence. Some cried. Some smiled. All understood. In a quieter corner of the city, Briggs, the former officer, worked at a mentorship program. He taught ethics to new recruits, not from textbooks, but from experience. One afternoon, he ended his class with a simple sentence: "I met the man I once disrespected. He didn't punish me. He educated me. If you ever forget why you wear that uniform, remember him." The recruits clapped, not out of pity, but respect. Across social media, a trend reemerged. The Ward effect. Not viral outrage, but stories of accountability, decency, courage. A sergeant in Chicago turned in a corrupt colleague. A sheriff in Texas opened his department's body cam archives to the public. A rookie in New York refused an unlawful order and cited the ward code on record. Each headline ended the same way: because dignity should never need permission. On his final day in active service, now Rear Admiral Ward walked the docks one last time. The wind smelled of salt and steel. Sailors stood in formation as he passed, saluting. But halfway down the line, Ward stopped. A young ensign asked, "Sir, permission to ask a question?" "Go ahead." "After everything, do you still believe respect can fix what's broken?" Ward smiled faintly. "Respect doesn't fix everything. But without it, nothing else works." He saluted the ensign, turned toward the sea, and exhaled. That night, the documentary Command Under Fire won the Peabody Award for storytelling. The closing shot? Ward standing at that same roadside plaque, the torn license framed under glass beside it. A narrator's voice concluded, "In an age of noise, he answered with silence. In an age of outrage, he answered with order. And in doing so, he reminded the world that true power is peace, worn patiently." The credits rolled over faint ocean sounds. Values-based call to action for your video outro. Have you ever seen someone's dignity tested and watched how they answered? This story isn't about uniforms or ranks. It's about remembering that respect is a responsibility, not a reward. Share this if you believe power should always serve humanity, not humiliate it. Because real strength is calm under fire. And justice? Justice is when discipline meets decency.